let's get started. And while the waiting room clears out, we will do that. Welcome back, everyone, to Elevate. For those new, I'm Kaushik, the founder. My background is Goldman Sachs in investment banking and then director in private equity. Since 2012, I also founded Elevate in 2019, and which is now the largest private equity investment banking, venture capital, hedge fund, recruiting and networking platform. So more to come on that. Today, we are super excited to host JP Morgan. It's just been such a pleasure working with the JP Morgan team here. Obviously, most folks on this call, would already know this. Just the absolute premier investment banking franchise, right, in the world, but also just the team itself, right? We sent, out of Elevate, it's one of the top 3 placements every single year, and just amazing junior as well as senior people at the firm. So we are very excited to share the JP Morgan story with everyone here from the Elevate audience. And really this session, we're going to be focused a lot around investment banking, JP Morgan's investment banking franchise. What is the day-to-day, right, for our summer interns, which a lot of you are applying for, as well as the analyst and associate and levels beyond that. We're going to be joined by bankers here who are going to share their own experiences. The goal is to be very, very interactive. So we're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. So you can start raising your hands and we'll get to those. Today, we have 500 plus applicants in the audience, 30 plus universities. I think we're up to like 40 or so, 85% diversity, 55%, underrepresented minority, like I said, 75% with upcoming internships in IB, PE, VC, AM, finance. And just to give you everyone an idea of who's all here, on the right is all of your peer schools and sort of everyone here in the audience, and on the left, experiences, backgrounds. Just some context for today's session, right? Obviously a leading M&A franchise as a whole, and we're going to get into this, but both in terms of deal volume as well as number of deals. This is from 2021, which is already a historical year in terms of M&A. I think the key takeaway here, right, is you join a firm like JP Morgan, you will get a chance to work on some of the market leading industry transactions in the world. And that's sort of the opportunity here, right, for everyone in the audience. So really take advantage of this opportunity as well as this session to learn a lot more and get all your questions answered about the firm. So without further ado, let us introduce our speakers here. I would love to start, Tyler, if you want to kick us off, and then we'll go to Harshini and then Shreya and then Jessica and the team. So let's go with that. Like I said, questions. One more thing. David asked, if you can put your school next to your name such that just when you're asking questions, the speakers are aware of and have a little bit more context. So Tyler, off to you.
Yeah, thanks guys. So guys, my name is Tyler Grow-Herring. I am a VP in the M&A group at JP Morgan here. So I sit in kind of one of our product groups focusing, specifically on mergers and acquisitions type transactions, sell side, buy side, spin-offs, split-offs. I can go through in more detail about that a little bit later on this presentation. But excited to be talking with you guys here.
Excellent. Thank you, Tyler. Harshini.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harshini, and I'm currently a second-year associate on the Power and Renewables Investment Banking coverage team. So I actually started here as an analyst and have been here for 4 years now. Did the 2 of an analyst and stayed on. And so in my job, we cover any type of transaction. So ECM, DCM, M&A, whatever it might be, for any clients that are utilities or like clean tech, renewables focused companies. So excited to meet you all.
Such an exciting industry right now. So Harshini, we'll get into that in a second. Shreya, you're next.
Hi guys, hi everyone. I know I have seen a couple of you in prior Elevate events, but I graduated recently from UChicago in 2021 and started at JPM after my internship as a sophomore in the MNC or the TMT group in New York. But excited to be talking to all of you in the next hour.
Awesome. Thank you, Shreya. Hey, Shreya, just a heads up. I don't know if there's something you can control or Arman, if you can work with Shreya. There's a little bit of background noise. So I'm just to give you a heads up. If I'm not sure if I'm the only one hearing it, but just heads up. Cool. Thank you, Shreya. Awesome. And Jessica, I'd love to sort of have you give an intro to the team.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Levon. I am actually one of the recruiters for JP Morgan Chase's investment banking program. So I'm sure some of you have connected with me previously. I support our New York hiring for the investment banking summer analyst program and the full-time program as well. So hopefully just here to answer some questions about the recruiting timeline and bust any myths you guys may have about what it's like to interview at JP Morgan. So pleased to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jessica and team. Awesome. Let's dive in, folks. So Tyler, I mean, maybe let's start with you a little bit. You spoke a little bit about M&A versus product coverage. Before we dive into sort of the day-to-day, et cetera, if you can just give the audience an overview of kind of how the firm is structured, right, across the board, and what are the types of opportunities that exist across, M&A, product, other products or industry groups.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of kind of how the investment banking division is kind of structured, the way to think about it is there's, it's split between product groups and coverage groups. So, for example, M&A is a product group. For me, I focus specifically on, M&A type transactions, but it could be across, really any industry. So I've done kind of transactions in the, the renewable space, the EV space, electric vehicles, kind of in the consumer space, healthcare, all across that. So, I very much kind of focus on, the product of M&A itself rather than a specific, industry, versus, some of the industry coverage groups that we have, such as, power and renewables or diversified industries or healthcare, consumer, et cetera. Those groups will also do M&A transactions, but in their own industry space, and also do things like debt and equity capital markets as well. And then similarly, when those groups do end up doing debt or equity kind of offerings, the appropriate kind of product, DCM or ECM will be joining their team to kind of support them throughout that transaction process as well. So, that's kind of how we've done things. So I work with, like I said, a variety of kind of the industry coverage groups. And, kind of as you start to move up, closer to kind of, director or MD, you start to focus a little bit more on a specific industry. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that's how JP Morgan does it. I know like other places, they'll actually kind of have them all integrated within, so there's no differentiated product or coverage groups. So it's just something that you might notice as you're going across different banks. They might do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I have a follow-up, and I want to hear Harshini and Shreya's take on this. But there's a lot of with our undergrad audience, right, class of 24s and 23s to an extent, and 25s in the audience. Maybe there's kind of pros and cons, right, of going to M&A is, you don't get a hugely deep dive into an industry group versus you get to build a lot of technical skills. And then on the coverage side, right, you maybe don't always get M&A experience, but do a lot of different types of deals. In a 2-year program, you're building a lot of different skill sets. But can you highlight a little bit on bust some of those myths as far as what students might be worried about?
Yeah, I mean, I think in either role, whether you are in a product group or a coverage group, you're going to get a fantastic experience, both from just learning new things and, both from a technical perspective and, like an industry perspective. I would say, if you're thinking of just your summer program, in any case, 10 weeks is not nearly enough time to even get really a taste, in my opinion, of like a full transaction. You'll kind of get some exposure to kind of like what goes on during a transaction, but in my opinion, you really don't get a good feel for the job until you've probably been here for like 2 years almost, and you get kind of the reps of different deals, because every deal that you do end up doing can be pretty different, and there's always like a bunch of different things that you're going to be doing that are tailored for that specific client. So in either case, you're going to get a great experience. I would say that in the times that I've been working with coverage teams, the M&A group will typically focus a lot on like modeling, process management, and things like that. But similarly, the coverage teams will end up doing modeling as well. It's kind of, at the end of the day, we're all kind of one big team, and it's we're kind of partners at the end of the day on whatever we're working on. So we're kind of working with each other and just allocating like different work streams and figuring out what's going to be what do we have to do to get the best outcome for the client at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Harshini, any thoughts on that coverage versus, as I'm sure you've advised a lot of junior people on this in the last 4 years?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add, looking at it from a coverage perspective, is M&A is, in my opinion, like the closest to an industry group that we probably have amongst our product partners. I think because of the nature of an M&A transaction, which is a little bit longer, a little bit more drawn out, we all kind of end up on the same team together, and we divide up work, whether it's marketing materials or the model or process execution and diligence, based on whoever's more free. So I think that M&A is kind of a unique beast in the way that we work with our M&A counterparts. I would say ECM, DCM, whether it's like investment grade debt or leverage finance, which is high yield debt, I think those rules are a lot more defined. And I think that what you get on an industry team is a lot of reps with a certain product and a lot of execution experience. You move pretty fast. ECM, DCM almost runs like a trading floor. They're very markets focused and markets based, and they're talking to investors, they're talking to, like the buyers of the products, et cetera. So I would say that's one difference. I think coverage and M&A kind of blend together in terms of the type of work that we do. And I think that ECM, DCM, and our other kind of like very specific product-based groups are, I think the benefit there is that you get a lot of reps with a certain type of transaction, and it's very execution oriented. And I think the benefit to coverage is that you kind of are with these clients day in and day out, and the goal is to help the company with whatever they might need. And that's what is so great about JP Morgan, is that we have this like full suite of products that we can offer them. So whatever their needs are, we can usually find the best solution. Like that's our goal, is coverage.
Yep. Yeah. And that's actually a really good point that Harshini brought up is like the one, and I should have mentioned this, like I say, I had my blinders up and I was thinking about the M&A group in particular, but I say it takes 2 years to like really fully understand the job, because an M&A mandate is typically a very drawn out mandate. Like one deal can take, 6 to 9 months basically to do just, from start to close, versus if you're DCM or ECM, debt or equity, those are very much more kind of like drop ship, and, they're kind of going in with their expertise, and maybe it'd be like a month to a month and a half or something like that, in terms of just like the actual hard kind of, down and dirty work that you're doing. So, and to that point, because you're working with the client for that long over that amount of time, you do get, a ton of, kind of industry exposure and experience from that as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I guess as a banker, right, or as a professional, you have to, there's a lot of skills that you need to learn. So it's kind of the order of skills that you're learning, and is one thing. And the other thing is, a lot of our students, if you really love an industry group, then yeah, go try to get that. But if you're still open to learning a lot and working on deals, I think, the coverage, the product groups makes a lot of sense. Okay, so a few questions have come in. I'm going to get to them in just 1 second. I want to spend a little bit of time on, day to day. So, Harshini, I'd love to start with you and go to Shreya, and then Tyler. So your evolution of the role, right? So as an analyst, right, like what does that look like? And then as you start taking more of a senior role, what does that look like? And maybe you can comment a little bit on what your summer was like, right? And when you were at JPM.
Yeah. So I think as an analyst, like the number one goal is to just do the work. I think that's kind of like what you've come in to do. And so, whether it's a pitch or it's an actual deal that you're, kind of actively working through, the biggest thing that you do every morning is like find out what you're going to do that day. So I think the biggest thing to know about investment banking is that there are no 2 days that look exactly alike, and every day you kind of come in and you figure out what you're going to be working on that day. And I would say the most common tasks that I would do are like putting a deck together, like updating charts, like preparing market pages, like a market update, trading updates of how the company is performing. We work on modeling. If it's a pitch, we'll do, most commonly in my sector, like accretion dilution models. We'll do DCFs. We'll do some LBOs for sponsor type infrastructure investments. Like it's really a wide variety of things. But I think the one thing that you can rely on your day-to-day is that they all look different. And then as you move into an associate role, I think from analyst, you go from getting really good at the technicals, right? Getting really good at like just executing what you're asked to do. And in the first year, people are going to hold your hand through all of that and give you a lot of training and a lot of coaching, and like really make sure you have a good foundation beneath you. And then by the time you're a second year, you start to kind of independently know how to run those things by yourself. So no one's like teaching you how to do like the basic technicals anymore. And they're instead looking to you to be able to answer questions about the model, right? Like add in your thoughts about, okay, this isn't working. Why isn't it working? And how do we make it work? So it's like your turn to kind of contribute to meetings and be like, this is where, like, this is what my idea is. This is how I think we can improve this page or this exercise or this model, formula, whatever it might be. And then by the time you're an associate, you're just kind of given more responsibility of managing. You're more in charge of like managing the processes, connecting with other product partners. You're the one who's expected to speak up during all your client and senior meetings. So as an analyst, if you speak up, it's great. It's like a gold star for you. As an associate, you're the one who's getting asked the question and you have to respond to it. So you have to still be in the numbers while not doing the numbers. And then you have to also start thinking about how to put pages together, how to outline decks. What is the content? What is the message that we're trying to kind of, get across to the client based on your MD's directions? And so the role becomes a little bit more managey, a little bit more teaching oriented, and also a little bit more content focused, like, because you're actually kind of coming up with some of the pages and coming up with how you want to deliver the message.
Amazing. Shreya, I'll get to you next on this question. One thing that amazes me when I talk to all JP Morgan, sort of all of our analysts, right, that go in, is just the amount of responsibility, right, that you get as a junior analyst. And Harshini kind of alluded to this, that, in that 1-2 year time frame, you're learning so much and you really are running deals right at that point in terms of modeling and stuff. So maybe you can hit a little bit on your experience to date and sort of the level of responsibility that you get as an analyst and how much of a learning, right, that has been on your career at this point, to this point.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think I second like everything that Harshini said. Like it's so much different every day when you walk in. You're like, you don't know what you're going to be working on for the next 10 or 12 hours. But I think kind of looking at it from like a high level perspective, I think how it varies is like what kind of stage in the process you are in. So at a time, like, an analyst can be working on 4 to 5 deals. Usually it's usually 4 to 5 live processes, but it can also be like 1 to 2 high intensity transactions. And I think like, I think it's easier to understand from a perspective like how deals kind of flow in terms of from the time you're staffed, when you're like really understanding what's kind of the nuts and bolts of the business and like understanding what the industry dynamics are, to kind of putting the decks together, as Harshini said. And then I think like spinning up the analysis is basically kind of the first 2 or 3 weeks, I would say. But I think after that, like the whole deal process becomes very ad hoc and like very much like a crossover of teams asking for something or client asking for a specific request. So I think like, that also kind of weaves in, Kaushik, to your question on the learning curve, that the fact that every day is so different, you're not really doing the same analysis every single day. I think as an example, like, in TMT, like we do a lot of free cash flows or a lot of LBOs. And I think it's so interesting that, every time I've done it in a very different format, in a very different way. And like, there's always new complexities getting added. So I think not any day is like similar, and that kind of like contributes to the steep learning curve and like having a different experience throughout your like 2 years as an analyst.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sort of leads me to, and I see all these hands are raising, so we'll get to these questions as we go. Thank you all. I think, embolden yourself to ask questions on top of mind. These, the folks are here to give you an honest perspective of what it's like to work at JP Morgan, right? So use the opportunity. On that point, the summer internship program, right? It's known in JP Morgan summer internship program is a very active, where you're given real responsibility, shadowing and working on real transactions, etc. So maybe Shreya and Harshini, you can speak a little bit as summer interns there, how that program helped you, come back, but also what are the types of experiences you had that gave you really a good flavor for M&A and investment banking?
Yeah, no, I can kick off on that. I know that a part of my introduction was also cut off. So just to give a background, I started off as a sophomore intern. So my experience was slightly different, you could say, but I think it was largely similar to being a junior analyst and like starting as an analyst in the team. But I think usually you spend like the 5 to 10 weeks of your internship, like really focusing on live transactions, kind of being like another analyst in the team, and actively like, starting out maybe with shadowing part of the process, like understanding how the analyst is working on it, or like even I guess like, actively contributing in terms of like anything that you learn in your training. One thing that I figured out was like, our trainings were very well placed in a way that every week you were working on, for example, a DCF, then you would likely get that DCF future on in one of the deals that you get staffed on. So you really get an opportunity, like, theoretically learn it from people like who've actually done it before, to actually implementing it in your daily life, like, in terms of the transactions you're on. So I think it really kind of gives like, both the perspectives within your 10 weeks that you're at JP Morgan. Yeah.
Awesome. Harshini, how about you? Your experience over the summer? And
yeah, I have very little to add. I think that's exactly it. I think that your internship is just a test run for being an analyst. So I think that when you hit the desk as a first year, and the way that you're treated as an intern are the exact same. So obviously people are going to be very supportive and spend a lot of time teaching and training. And, the first couple of weeks, you'll probably just be sitting in people's cubes for a majority of your time, just like sitting right behind their chair and watching what they do. And then you'll kind of slowly start to be given like simple tasks. Every time something happens in a process, you'll get explained what's happening, why it's happening, what the background is. So I really think, as great as it is to have interns, I know that you guys will all come in like gunning to want to add value and like want to be the most supportive and like impress everyone, but really it's meant to train you guys, and to just like check attitude, check effort, like check to make sure that you want to be there and are interested in learning and, are able to pick up those concepts when people are explaining them to you, but like no one's expecting, miracles. Like, I think the biggest thing is just attitude, giving you the opportunity to see what investment banking is about and making sure that it's kind of clicking.
Harshini, you took our next question off the bat. So my next question would be, what is the key to summer success? But before that, I think one of the questions that comes up a lot, and one of the reasons why I think all of our audience, you guys should kind of, as we get a lot of questions around, bulge bracket, like a JP Morgan or, a boutique firm, like there's plenty of them out there. One of the huge advantages is what Shreya and Harshini just pointed to is that systematic training mentality, right? Not just when you start, right? You have 6 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks of training, but even over the summer, you have a week of training. And then sort of, there's that mentality that's more of because it's slightly larger in terms of team and sort of dynamics, people are sort of more willing to kind of put in that time into the training piece. So I think that's an important distinction that Shreya and Harshini just made. Tyler, I'll start with you on this question, and then we'll start taking some audience questions. Is what are the keys to success for a summer intern, right? So you've seen multiple classes of summer analysts come through the pipeline. So what sort of, as our future summer interns and future analysts in this panel, what should they be doing to ensure they get a return offer, and what are the things they should not be doing, right, to not get that?
Yeah. I mean, like at the end of the day, to be successful in a banking internship, you're really there to support the full-time analysts, as a summer analyst. So, you're not leaving the office before they are. If there's something like anything that you could possibly do, it's your job to make their life, as easy as it possibly can be. Even though you might not know anything at this point. And the other thing too is to realize, like, we don't expect, all of the interns to know absolutely everything there is to know about all these projects that you'll be kind of, shadowing on. So it's to, kind of have that hunger to learn, like have a great attitude, and just show that you're ready to hit the ground running and work really hard, because that's what it kind of takes to learn everything that you have to quickly enough to ramp up and be able to ultimately be in that full-time analyst role. So it's really just kind of, like I said, having a great attitude, just showing that kind of determination to do well, and showing that you're there to be kind of a team player. And those are the two things I think of that make someone successful, that ultimately later down the road is like able to do the analyst role like really well.
Amazing. Team player, engagement, positive attitude, and then sort of trying to add value where you can. I think great advice. And just taking ownership is another thing I think Tyler mentioned on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So let's Jessica, I wanted you to jump in a little bit and talk about the process. But before we do that, I want to get maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll run through those, and then I'll have Jessica go through the process. And the next set of questions I'll ask for the audiences, or sort of for the speakers, is interviews, right? So what are you looking for? How do people stand out? And those types of questions. We'll come back to that. Joel, if you want to start, we'll do Joel, Brayden, Rohan, Peter. Just go down a few of these, and then we'll come back to the topics. Go ahead, Joel. You guys should do a quick intro, like a 10-second intro, where you're from, what your interests are, and then you can get to your question.
Thank you, first of all, to all of you for coming out. My name is Joel Weeks, and I currently go to Florida State University. And this summer, I'll be a sophomore, and I'm going to be actually at HL in New York City. Here's one of the first questions, at least, that I have. I was actually able to speak to a JP analyst this morning, and one of the things that really stood out to me was how much he pointed out that he learned from a deal, a very unique deal that he had to take that was actually smaller than the typical one that you look at JP, but how much responsibility he was forced to take on, and how he almost described it as, I was forced to grow up very quickly. I would be really interested in hearing any experience that you all had within your time at JP Morgan, right? There's experience here from an analyst to a VP level where you had to use that team-focused environment at JP to overcome an obstacle like that just really stood out to you from your career so far.
Shreya, you seem like
no, I don't know, I have a quick thing to add. I mean, probably on the opposite spectrum. I worked on a deal that's like basically started the ripple effects in the video game industry. So it was so interesting because we got staffed on it, I think, in before Thanksgiving. So I think when we were staffed, we were thinking, it's going to be a typical M&A transaction, goes for 6 months. However, it was like compressed into 6 weeks and 3 weeks of diligence to announcement. And I think one thing that really speaks to it is like, the deal experience can vary so much across what you're working on. And I think specifically saying to this context, like, we were going basically from understanding what the business was to doing all the analysis to actually understanding the decks to basically having board meetings every single day. And I think having that compressed experience like just means that there's no hierarchy that exists within a team. Like you're communicating equally to your VPs as much as you're doing to MDs and associates. And I think it's the best experience because you're working across a team of M&A and other financing teams across JP Morgan, but then you're taking as much responsibility as you want. Like no one's gonna blame you to like, oh, you took more ownership than you were supposed to as an analyst. I think it's actually the opposite that, if you take something off somebody else's plate, it's taken as a positive. So I think it's very much variable in terms of like what deal experience you get. And I guess I would probably take it a step further that even like, not taking from a live deal experience, but taking from a pitch experience that I've had on a couple of like, really complex divestiture type of transactions. I think it's very interesting because sometimes like, having a compressed amount of time or sometimes even having like a longer period of time gives you a lot more time to go into the detail or maybe like even step up and like take as much responsibility as you want. So I think every deal is very different, but I think you shouldn't like look at it in a way that only live deals is something that kind of contributes to your experience. I think pitches at the same time are like very, very meaningful and like, can be very much a big like, steep learning curve.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So Joel, thank you for that question. Like every project gives you a different sort of experience and you sort of just have to take it on and make the maximum impact. One thing I'll add to Shreya's point is that I think Shreya and Harshini, everyone could point to this. You do have the opportunity to step up and start building client relationships like at your level, right? So maybe it's not the CEO or CFO, right? It's finance, the finance manager or, director of finance. So I think that is the coolest part, right? At every level, you get to do that with your counterparts, whether it's, sponsors or whether it's other people. So I think that's embedded in Shreya's answer. So thank you, Joel. Thank you for that. Okay, Brayden. By the way, in the interest of time, we'll just keep going through these as quickly as possible. So for the audience, try to keep them succinct. And for our speakers, you can answer in the justifiable time, but go ahead, Brayden.
Hi guys, my name is Brayden Princeton. I am a student at the University of Maryland and also a student leader for Elevate Partnership Club, the Smith Finance Group. Also incoming private equity analyst for Stepstone Group. My question was pertaining specifically might be more related to Tyler.
Maybe Tyler, maybe you can answer it in a way like generally, but like what are clients looking for in these types of high pressure situations and how bankers can really add value, right? In terms of that type of environment.
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age, in any kind of high profile deal that you're working on, the client is always looking to you as like the go-to person to, bounce ideas off of and really to kind of just be supportive of them. And like I was actually going to talk about this on the last question that was asked, just in terms of like, I think the question, if I remember it correctly, is basically like, when did you feel like you had this like, just super big amount of responsibility? And I think back like a year or two ago, I guess 1 year ago when I was still an associate, like I was running the entire model for this like, $60 billion like spinoff transaction. And I was like, it's crazy to think like I had that amount of responsibility just for that type of work stream. And, you're talking with the CEO and the CFO, and like they're coming to us to be their support for these big transactions that literally could like make or break their own careers. So it's not just being good at your job from like an analytical perspective, but also just kind of being like supportive and like being a good friend, kind of, if that makes sense, and knowing how to like deal with them and figure out what their needs are. So
right. That's a great example. I mean, these deals ends up on the front page of the journal or the Financial Times, but at the same time, these are people and clients that you're dealing with that have real response. So this is just an amazing sort of juxtaposition. So I thank you. That was super helpful, Tyler. I think on the answer. Brayden, thanks for that. Okay, Rohan, we'll keep it moving. Rohan, Peter, Anirudh, we'll go through your questions. Go ahead, Rohan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for doing this. So I'm Rohan. I'm from North Jersey. I'm a sophomore at Princeton majoring in CS, but you guys kind of alluded to this earlier, that in like a capital markets or structured product group, you get these reps in a very specific product and you kind of get exposure to one very niche part of banking. Do you think that if you don't see yourself, you don't know where you see yourself in banking over the course of your career, that it makes sense to take this, even if you're specializing in an industry, it's kind of easier to learn about an industry than it is to relearn the fundamentals of M&A and having that wide exposure to have like a quasi generalist role in M&A or coverage group at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I mean, I think personally, like, you really can't go wrong with either path. I think it's really a simple question that you should ask yourself is like, are you more like analytical or in like thinking about the math and the numbers at the end of the day, or are you thinking more of like the strategy and like what's going on like from a strategic point of view? Because it's kind of like a little bit of a Venn diagram, right? Where I would say you're still kind of doing a lot of both of those in, you know, either the product or the coverage side. But you do tend to focus a little bit more on one or the other, depending which path you want to go. So I think it's asking that question, and you know, if you end up deciding that you want to change that later down the road, honestly, like I think it's very easy to you know, move and potentially switch that up if you wanted to. I know JP Morgan specifically, you know, kind of prides itself in having, you know, a great amount of mobility. And having the ability to, you know, work in, you know, maybe a different group if you really wanted to. If you're good at your job and, you know, you think you would want to have that different type of opportunity, they'll give it to you for sure.
I will say, just to add on really quickly. Oh, sorry, Kaushik, if you had something. I was just going to say really quickly, I think kind of going with what your question was originally, I would say that generalist to more specific is probably the easier path than very specific to going broader. So like if you start in structured products, like I don't know, like infrastructure finance, or if you start in like converts, like, you know, converts part of ECM, for example, also very technical, also very analytical, but it's going to be like, you're going to know this one product really, really well. And I think that going from that experience it's kind of harder to translate into a more generalist M&A or private equity role if that's what you want to do. So I think that there is some maneuvering of just what the skills are that you want to learn, and then figuring out what role would best fit those skills. So as you think about your longer term, either banking or PE career, I think what's important is not really the role, is not like necessarily the exact role that you have, whether that's coverage or industry or whatever it might, or coverage or product. I think it's more, what are the skills that you want to learn? Like where do you see yourself in 20 years? Like, what do you think the job is that you like? And then kind of working backwards from there.
Yep. But Rohan, the nice thing is, you know, for a firm like JP or some of these other firms, like you almost don't have to worry about it because you get incredible amount of deal flow and you just kind of get a bunch of different deal experience in your first 2 years, right? So I think there's a counterpoint there in that, like, no matter where you are, Tyler made this point, you'll probably be okay. But to the point is, if you wake up and you're like, hey, all I can think about is healthcare companies, or all I can think about is technology or consumer, then you should think about going to that industry. Does that make sense, Rohan?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, guys.
Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
And I have one more thing to add. It's just like, I mean, I remember when I was like in your guys' shoes, like I've been working for like 8 years now. And like, you know, you might think like, oh my God, like I need to make sure I make the right decision now. But like, you know, at the end of the day, like you're going to be working a really long time. And I think, you know, further down the road, you'll be surprised like how many other opportunities or like different paths you can potentially take. Like you don't have to figure it out right now. I think it's just kind of like going towards what you generally are looking to do, and then, you know, you can refine that, you know, as you go down your career path. So
totally, that's great advice. The careers are long, right? And it's sort of a winding path, and it's as much an introspective path as sort of an outward. So great point, Tyler. Okay, we'll take Peter, and then we'll take Peter and Anirudh, if you guys can be quick, and then we'll go to the interviews and sort of the internship process, and then we'll go back to the questions. So Peter from Columbia.
Hi, thank you guys for being here. I'm Peter Brown from Columbia University with the Columbia Economic Society. And my question is just about what ultimately made you guys, you know, decide to choose JP Morgan. I know you probably interned at many other places or had opportunities to look at other places, and what made you, you know, come, and what made you stay for so long? I mean, Tyler said you're 8 years working, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, you could start maybe on this.
Yeah. Well, so I actually started my career at a different firm. I started at William Blair, and I ended up making a move. Maybe this will give you like the answer as to why JP Morgan, but I made the move to JP Morgan because at the end of the day, I was doing a lot of M&A at William Blair, and JP Morgan in particular just has always had a really good M&A group and kind of product and brand. So I think that was important to me. And honestly, just like the people that I met here when I was kind of making that decision to come here, because thinking of it from the perspective of if I want to be doing banking for the rest of my career, I want to be surrounded by like the smartest people. I want to have like the most resources available to me. And when you're at a place bulge bracket bank like JP Morgan, all of that is available to you, and it's going to give you what you need, to really succeed. And I think that, is really important. And that's like one of the big reasons why I would, encourage you guys to like, strongly consider it if you are.
Yeah, agree with that. Anything else? I think Shreya, Harshini, you covered this sort of on your summer thing, but anything else you want to add to this?
No, I would just second the culture point. I think that I went through a pretty traditional summer analyst recruiting process. So you talk to quite literally every single bank that exists, and multiple people at those banks. So as I went through that process, I just think that like the people I had good conversations everywhere. I think every single conversation I had with the JP Morgan people was great. So I think the difference was realizing that it was a whole bank-wide form of culture, not just a cool person here or a cool person there. It was every person I talked to I really enjoyed talking to. So, and especially when you're accepting a generalist offer to New York, like you could end up anywhere. So I think the consistency gave me a lot of comfort that the bank kind of knew what it was looking for, the kind of people that it was looking for, and really prioritized that. So
yeah,
that's
an amazing point. I mean, obviously the reputation of the bank precedes itself, but realistically, like for everyone here, right, it's finding the right fit for you. And these are the people you'll be working with every day, right? So really go through the process and understand, this is the type of learning I want. These are the type of deals that I want to be working on. These are the type of people I want to work with. So great point, Harshini, on that. So Anirudh, let's take your question really quickly, and then I will go to the internship and sort of interview, and then we'll get through most of these questions. We're going to try. So, okay, let's go. Anirudh, please, if you can make it quick.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a sophomore at Northwestern, and I study math and econ. And I guess my question probably more to Harshini because she's closer to college. But when you entered college, like, did you know you wanted to do finance or banking? And like, what kind of realizations you made throughout college that have led you to JP Morgan?
Yeah. So the quick one is no. I came in pre-med, and I was pre-med for my entire first year, and I transferred to the business school my sophomore year. So I came in thinking I was going to do consulting. I was a president of like 3 consulting clubs when I did my first finance internship my sophomore year. And I think I just like the numbers aspect of it. I really like strategy, and that's why I'm in a coverage group, like an industry group, because I think that it marries the strategic consulting elements that I really liked, plus like a lot of technical analysis, being able to back up your strategy with actual numbers and evidence. And I liked that. So I pivoted very quickly and kind of jumped right into the investment banking process. But yeah, the decision for me was really, where can I learn a lot, right? And I think those were 2 paths where you can learn a lot. And I think for banking, it's just like we work a lot of hours, but I will say that the reason everyone who works here says that they've learned so much so quickly is because, well, we work a lot, right? So we're doing kind of a job and a half in one, but it's with like incredibly smart people. And I've always really liked the numbers element too. And I think that's a skill set that you really can't find anywhere else or can't hone anywhere else. So that's how I switched, but I was a very non-traditional candidate, to put lightly.
Yeah, no, look, I think the self-inspection is important, but also there's 2 sides of that, right? Like you work a lot, to Harshini's point, but in some sense, our analysts, right, and our associates even get 4 or 5 years of experience in 2 years, right? So it's a huge career, defining thing that you can think about. Okay, let's pause on the questions for just 1 second. I know there's a bunch of hands. We will try to get to as many as possible. Jessica, I want to bring you in here a little bit, and if you can talk to us a little bit about just generally deadlines, processes, what should candidates do? How should they stand out in the process? And then I'll get to the interviews in 1 second, but would love to have your insights And Jessica, for everyone on the call, is the go-to person, right? For all recruiting related questions and program related questions, both for summer and full-time. So, she's the face of sort of for on the recruiting side for anyone who has questions. But Jessica, I'll start with you here if you want to, give us a little bit of an overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that have gone through the application, you guys know it's an online application. You do the hire view, and then you would potentially come to that super day, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Our super days are all still virtual, so all on Zoom still, with 2 behavioral interviews and 1 technical interview. And the other thing I like to highlight as well, the hire view is a required part of the application. So as long as you meet all the minimum requirements for the role, you would receive a hire view video. And those hire view videos are watched by our business. So we have a team of hundreds of bankers that are dedicated to the recruiting process, just like these 3 fabulous folks here. And so they are watching those videos that you guys do. And that's kind of making the determination along with the rest of your application materials as to whether or not you'd be invited to a super day. So as you can imagine, the number of applications we get is a lot. There's a lot of you. A lot of you want to come work here, which is fabulous. So it can take some time on occasion for us to get back to you from the hire review stage to the super day stage. But we try and work as quickly as we can to make sure and let people know decisions, and then go to the super day from there. So that's sort of a general timeline. The other thing I'll just touch on quickly is all of our roles are generalist offers. So again, we've kind of been talking about product and coverage and all these placements, and we do all of our hiring into just the program itself for New York. When we talk about Tyler's office in Chicago and some of the other location specifics, we do offer like group specific hiring. So if you're not interested in New York, we do have some other opportunities, but by and large, you would go through a specific placement process with all of the 18 groups that take interns later in the spring after you accepted a role with us. So you would kind of have some time, some additional networking periods before you had to make a decision about, what kind of group you think might be the best fit for you. So that's just kind of a high level overview about our general recruiting process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica. Super, super helpful. We asked everyone a question who registered like the office preferences. So we'll share that with Jessica's team, obviously, along with the whole list and the attendee list from today. And so that'll also, if you guys are specifically interested in, hey, I want to go work in Boston, or I loved hearing from Tyler, I want to go work with Tyler. I think, we will, and the team will sort of take those into considerations for the placements as well, and et cetera. So super helpful. I want to just actually one question, interviews. So Tyler, Harshini, Shreya, you guys have done interviews a lot. What is maybe 1 or 2 things that stand out for you as you look at candidates in the interview setting? And what do you want people to really come in there and kind of knock it out of the ballpark, to be successful in the interview process?
Yeah, I'll start just because I do like so many interviews, I feel like nowadays. So I've had the chance to see a lot of people, and I think like the 2 things for me are like, one, like you got to know like the standard, like check the box, like kind of technicals and standard answers. And like, you can find this stuff like all over the internet. There's like a million guides for it. Like you guys, them at this point. It's like, walk me through a DCF, or, like what's an LBO, and like those sorts of things. And like, it's just like knowing that to kind of just demonstrate that you kind of have a grasp like finance, and kind of put in a little bit of the work to get prepared for the interview. So that's like one thing that I think is really important. And the second thing is just like knowing your story, and it's like knowing why you got to where you are now, and why are you deciding to pursue a career in banking, because it's a big decision. And if you kind of give this like half-hearted answer that doesn't really make sense to me, then like I'm going to be like, all right, well, this person doesn't really feel like they know what they're like getting themselves into, and this might not be like a good fit. So I think that's like the other biggest thing for me. And actually, the third thing too is just like having a good attitude, and basically demonstrating to me like you're someone that I would enjoy working with. And if you like check those 3 boxes, then like I'm going to hire you. So that's like the biggest thing, but
right.
That's what I would recommend.
Very, very helpful. Harshini, would you have to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're all on the same answer. I would say one thing for the technicals too, and this is partly my interviewing style, but also like interviews that I received when I was going through this. I think one unique thing that I experienced at JP Morgan and a couple other firms, but not all of them, there's like a step further to the technicals. Like all the attitude, behavior, I completely agree with everything Tyler said. I think a step further to the technicals is just, there's like the memorized answers that you get, and then there's the concepts behind them. And I would just say that some people love to do this, but like take the extra 5 minutes to understand like what those formulas actually represent. Like when do you use them? Why do you use them? Why do they matter? Like what is going on behind just the numbers and the addition and subtraction? Because I think people love to ask those kinds of questions. Like you'll do walk me through a DCF and then they'll break down WACC, right? And be like, okay, well, what's more expensive, debt or equity? Like why? Like give me a situation where a company's debt would be more expensive than its equity, et cetera, et cetera. So I think understanding the concepts and really getting the foundations is probably as important as just like knowing the answers to those kind of rote memorization questions.
Great point. And I would actually extend that to even your story, right? So you say, hey, I did this on a deal or on a project. Okay, what was the challenge you faced? Like, what did you do specifically? What was your teammate doing? So I think just having sort of a lot of depth to your answers becomes really important in these settings. Okay, so we've got roughly 10 minutes left and we got 13, 14 questions that are still coming in. So let's take about a minute per question so we can get as many people a chance to sort of ask them as possible. So I would love that help from both our panelists and our audience. So David from UVA, then Annabelle, then Atticus, Ronan.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Kaushik. So hi, just introducing myself. My name is David Lakai. I'm from UVA and I'm from the DC area, just outside of Nova. And so my question was, what are some of the biggest growing pains you had coming to JP first off and just kind of building off throughout your career?
I can start. I think the first one, and this is personal, is just I think most people who come into this job are very used to being at the top of everything. Smartest in their class, very high GPAs, very prepared and ready to kill it. And I think the thing that probably surprises everyone the most is how much you feel like you don't know when you first start this job. I think it's just the shock of the sheer volume of things that all these analysts and associates seem to be doing so quickly that you just cannot figure out. And I think it's being ready with a very strong positive attitude of, that's okay. Like, I'm not like, why would I know this? Like, why would I know what FactSet is? Why would I know how to update this chart? Like, or build this model or whatever else it might be. So I think it's just preparing yourself for the fact that there's going to be a lot of learning that has to happen. So you have to put yourself in the mindset of, I'm not going to know most things and that's okay. And now my goal is to like really figure out how to learn as quickly as I can rather than getting stressed out that you don't know things. I think that's personally what I think is the toughest kind of transition point.
Great point. Anything else from the team? Thank you, David. That was a really good question. Annabelle from Michigan.
Hi, I'm Annabelle. Thank you guys so much. I'm in the Ross School of Business at Michigan. And I just wanted to ask Harshini specifically, what was the deal or pitch that you worked on where you really felt like you were learning something, or your most pivotal learning moment?
Yeah, I think the coolest like moment I had in my job in the very beginning was at the end of my first year. I did an IPO for like a resi solar company. That just wasn't a thing when I first started because we mostly covered utilities. And so I was on this brand new pitch, and I think the ability to learn together, like with my ED, like with my MD, was really cool. I think all of us putting our heads down, being like, what do we need to do here? Talking to ECM every single day, figuring out like what our role is and how we add value was one of like the more exciting opportunities. And since then, seeing my group transition into now we have like 15 active IPOs, like that has happened over the course of my 4 years on this team. So just seeing that transition, seeing like this industry change as much as it has been really exciting. And I'm sure Shreya can speak more to that in tech.
Yeah, no, I think it's very like I would probably echo that a lot. Like there's a lot of like instrumental like first things to do, and I think in TMT specifically, like it happens a lot. I think it also kind of touches on like one of the questions that somebody asked in the beginning, that when you're like balancing this idea of like, should I want to join like coverage group or do I want to join like a product group? I think one thing that's like great about TMT that I can speak to is like there's so many niches that exist. Like we have 16 subverticals, and I feel like even within the subverticals, there's like so much happening. So there's a very high possibility that within a year, if you're working, you wouldn't be working on something that's exactly similar to something else. Even the business dynamics change a lot.
So thank you for that. Let's keep moving. Atticus, then Ronan from Georgetown, then Nicholas, Lauren. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Atticus. I'm a sophomore finance major at the University of Maryland. Thank you all so much for your time. It's great to meet all of you. My question is if you could go back in time and give your past self some advice or anything in hindsight, is there like, what would you tell yourself? Is there anything that you would do differently?
Okay, so I'll let me try to give an answer. I'm thinking, I'm trying to think about like what I would say, but I think like honestly, like early in your career, like I think the biggest thing to be focused on is just like getting like good experience. And like I think a lot of you guys will realize like also once you start like going into the real world and like working for like a company, like it's not like school anymore where they tell you like exactly what you need to do. Like you need to do XYZ and then you'll get an A. Like you need to kind of like apply yourself a little bit more and like seek out like the good work that's going to actually like give you the experience that you need to then accelerate everything that you're learning and then go on to like the next big thing that is going to help you even more. So there's like that's one piece of advice that I would give. And like you also build that just from like building relationships like within the workplace. Like you shouldn't just be kind of checking in and out at the end of the day and just going through the motions. Like you want to be building relationships within the office and like applying yourself like I was kind of saying. And that was like one thing that I kind of think about like really differentiated like some of the better analysts who then turn into like really great associates and VPs, et cetera.
Excellent. Nicholas from UChicago. So we'll keep it moving. Nicholas from UChicago.
Hi, thanks so much for taking the time. My name is Nicholas Plansky. I'm a second year UChicago majoring in econ and global studies. Kind of throwing it back to the start of the conversation, you mentioned that you're typically staffed on 4 to 5 live deals at a time. What percentage of those transactions are like equity and debt deals, like capital raises versus M&A transactions, or kind of how does that balance work out?
Yeah.
This is, I guess, mainly for for Harshini and Shreya. No offense to Tyler.
No, I'm happy to take that. I think I mentioned the 4 to 5 deals at a time. I think it varies a lot. Like I think like one part you need to understand is like it's really based on who has capacity and who gets staffed on what becomes available at what point in time. So there's like a lot of ifs going into that equation at one point in time. But I think personally speaking from my experience, like I've been fortunate to have like a lot more M&A experience. I think I've had 80% of my time being spent on M&A and like 20% on financing and 0 equity so far. But I think it varies a lot. Like I know some people who've like literally only done equity. And I think it's like there's no plus or downsides to any of that. I think like it's almost like, chances of like, getting a heads and tails, like over a period of like 10 years if you're in this career, like you're going to do everything to some extent, you're going to have like a balanced experience. And I think it just varies on like, what you end up getting staffed on. I think one thing that does affect all of this, like, the entire equation is like how your group really deals with like how the transactions are staffed. So I think some of the smaller M&A transactions, like, some groups tend to do them in-house versus having an M&A team along with it. And I think similarly with equity and like DCM or like very initial stages transactions. So I think that kind of also affects how much responsibility you're getting. For example, like it might be a huge transaction, but then you have like, I don't know, 6 other people working from the M&A team, which kind of reduces the amount of work that you can do on your end or like from the coverage side. So I think it's very variable and like, changes person to person, time to time. But yeah, that's kind of like, I think the best way I can add to that.
That's a great answer. And oftentimes if you're working on a lot of stuff, it's top of mind and it's very hot. So you get a really good live deal experience. So thank you, Nicholas. Lauren, you're next.
Hi, my name is Lauren Fallberg. I'm studying Russian with a track in economics at Princeton. A bit avant-garde, but I was wondering for all of you, not necessarily before starting your career at JP Morgan, but during your tenure there, what classes or books or like any other guidance have any of y'all used or found to be helpful while you've been working at JP Morgan?
I'll start maybe. I think just like honestly just staying up like on current events and kind of like what's happening and just the business world in general is really helpful. I think that kind of just gets you familiar with like kind of what people are interested in at the moment and like what kind of businesses are doing, and you'll kind of start just getting familiar with like the jargon and everything that is thrown around a lot just on the job here that we do today. In terms of just other resources, like I always like tell some students like you don't have to go like too crazy in terms of like doing like all of this like modeling or whatever like while you're in school, because like you will end up learning that while you're here.
That's great advice, Tyler. I think my only 2 cents on this would be, if you have an industry or something that you like, for instance, just go subscribe to like the Axios or whatever the reading in that industry, just to get started understanding it. And then the other way is just pick up a 10K. If you really love consumer companies, go pick up like, Bumble's IPO S1 or something like that. And so you just kind of, just get used to the language of what type of things that people are talking about. Or if you like technology, go pick up Snap's, IPO document, and just start learning the language that way. That way you associate yourself with industries that you're already sort of familiar with, and you start understanding business language that way. So maybe that's just some other advice, right, that I'd give the team here. Okay, thank you, Laura, for your question. Helmer from Cornell.
Hi, yeah, I'm Helmer. I'm a current sophomore at Cornell University studying applied economics and management. And also I'm an incoming sophomore summer intern at JP Morgan in investment banking division, which I'm really excited about. But as you guys have kind of like started your career and really established yourselves in the world of finance, what do you think is the biggest differentiating factor between somebody who has like a longevity in career in finance and not? And what do you think is like the biggest standout factor?
I only have one, and it's attitude. I think that I really think that this job is something that, not everyone's going to be amazing at, but I think that hard work and effort and just wanting to be there is like 95% of the battle. So I think that as long as you can like find a way to make it sustainable for yourself and find a way to appreciate the fact that like the work that you're doing is going into like, as Kaushik mentioned, like going into boardrooms, and like you are in the middle of board meetings, helping companies make like multi-billion-dollar transactions happen on a daily basis. And like, that's why you work hard. That's why sometimes things are urgent. That's why sometimes like things feel stressful, but kind of keeping that in mind and keeping that attitude strong throughout your, however year long career, I think is the most important thing. And I sound like a broken record, so I'll stop saying it after this, but I do think it makes a really big difference.
Yeah. And that goes back to my point. It's like, you're not just going through the motions, but you're going in there, like, into the office that day, determined, like with an idea of like what you're going to do and like, who you're going to be working with. And, with the idea that, you're going to end up becoming better, at the end of the day. Like I see so many people that will just like coming in and out, like checking it out. They're not really talking to some people and not like building those like, office relationships with, who they're working with. And, just having that kind of like, good attitude, like Harshini was saying, and just really applying yourself, like I was saying kind of earlier, is what like just helps you so much, in my opinion. But
yeah, great advice. I think also one other thing I'll add here is longevity, right? Doing something you love, doing something that you're good at and sort of wanting to be the best at something. That's when you'll kind of give incrementally a little bit more. And I think that's sort of the drive, right? That whatever it is that you end up doing over your career. Thank you, Helmer. Super great question. Rosemary from Stanford.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary, and I'm a freshman at Stanford studying economics. I'm originally from New York. And I was wondering if you could talk about mentorship and the role it's played in your life before JP Morgan, and also if there's a lot of mentorship at the firm.
Great question.
I think, sorry, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I had a pretty unique experience in a way that I think a lot of people from UChicago as alums were at JP Morgan, but I think contrastingly, that said, they were also in the Chicago office, and I was more interested being in the New York office. I think for me, what kind of worked as before getting into JP Morgan in terms of mentorship, it was just like reaching out to people and kind of scheduling some time, but then also trying to make it less transactional in a way that you're not just like on a spree of asking questions and not really understanding, or trying to build a conversation out of it. And I think that kind of what kind of was a budding mentorship in a way that when I met them at the firm when I joined, it was much more so of let's grab coffee, let's understand what we're working on. And even if we're not in the same groups, I think 2 or 3 people whom I really had good relationships with were in FIG, M&A, and really different groups from TMT that I'm in right now. So I think that is something that we can try on even before you get inside the firm. And I think while you're at the firm, the mentorship is really JP Morgan, I think especially in my experience, is really kind of cultivates that a lot at a lot of levels, in terms of understanding from your associates how they're working on it, how they think about things, and really kind of taking your deals beyond just this is the deliverable, I want to turn it by then, make it more yeah, how can we work on this together? Or like, what do you think about this deliverable? Like, why is it needed? Or like, what's kind of the instance behind it? So I think it's more like just making every the conversation that you have with someone less transactional. And that's just kind of like how you can build like long-term mentorship opportunities.
Hi, I'm Sani, and I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. So I'm currently attending Barnard College at Columbia University, and I'm majoring in economics. I just wanted to know what your favorite project or deal was that you got staffed on and why.
That was not a cool deal that had where an activist was involved. So, and I think that it was cool for, a year and a half to be kind of like in the trenches working with the company, figuring this out. Getting that experience and being like right up close and personal with things that were front page on the news and things like that was really exciting for me, at least.
Hi, yeah, thanks for being here. My name's Theodore. I just wanted to ask, what led you guys to choose the product groups you're in? I guess this is a bit more geared towards Harshini, but I'm very interested in renewables and diversified energy.
I picked energy because it was just changing so much. I think even before I came into the group, you could see part of that happening. And the way it was explained to me was, oh, utilities are investing in renewables now, and all these foreign companies have pivoted to, clean tech, and it's a huge opportunity. And then to see the whole industry change and to see all these clean tech companies finally reach scale, basically, and get to a point where we can provide investment banking services to them has been really cool. So I came in for kind of the excitement and the change that was happening in the space, and it very much played out the way that I wanted it to. So.
Excellent. Shreya, anything on TMT that you haven't covered?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to it a lot before. So I guess just like in one quick sentence, I think my reasoning for joining a industry group was I just wanted to be as industry agnostic, but then also get experience of as many products as possible. And I think for me, trying to fit in that equation, TMT seemed kind of to be the best choice, that it had the most number of sub verticals, was changing a lot. Every business at this point, I feel like, is tech and something else. So it's very much like a horizontal sector. And I think at the same time, I wasn't super married to the idea of being only in M&A or really wanting to do that when I started as a sophomore. So I think for me, the choice was simpler, that I still wanted to have that exposure to many different type of complex things like stock splits or something. So yeah.
Makes sense. Picking an issue you're interested in or where you'll get a lot of good experience. I think that's just one piece of advice. Michaela from Duke.
Yes, hi, I'm Michaela from Duke. And I had got a quick question for logistics. I'm looking to apply for the sophomore program, and I was wondering how receptive JP Morgan was to kind of the not so stereotypical resume, and how much, given that we don't have much experience coming in as a freshman, how receptive they are to different things on the resume.
So I think from my perspective, when I applied, I honestly went in with a blindfolded, not understanding how many people they're going to take. And I think that's kind of always the best approach, because you don't want to think about, oh, they're just going to take 5 or 6 sophomores versus 100 juniors. I think the best approach to go in is I'm really interested in the industry, and I want to experience for one extra summer. So I think going in with that open mindset is always a plus. It's really what kind of experiences you like to show on your resume, how you kind of phrase them. I think that's also really sets you apart, because two people might have done similar investment banking internship, but then they might have different ways of really putting that together on a piece of paper. So I think for both of them, just going with an open mindset. I don't think there's any kind of a formula or cookie cutter that kind of makes it makes you the best positioned.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll just add across these different banks right on our platform. One is build relationships. So if you can, right, building relationships with someone there that you can get to know, or people there. And number 2, telling your story about why you're doing this, because at the end of the day, people realize, right, everyone here is pretty young, right? So you kind of are learning things as you go, but you have to demonstrate that, hey, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z because of this. All right, last question. We'll go to Josh from Columbia.
Hi, thank you for doing this today. I'm Josh, studying math at Columbia University. What do you think, what aspects of the culture at JP Morgan do you think separates your firm?
I would just say, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is just everyone that I've worked with here is incredibly smart. And, for that reason, it just helps me to push myself more. And, there's no, just shortage of people for you to bounce ideas off of, and to be able to, talk with and try to work through something. And that in itself, and to that point, everyone's super open to always, discussing something or thinking about something with you. I don't think I'll reach out to people that I have never met before in a different office on something that I'm trying to figure out, and I'll like establish a relationship with them, and they'll help me out of the goodness of their own hearts to work through a problem, and that in itself has always really impressed me, and I think is really cool.
On that note, we're way over, but thanks for the team. Really, I want to take a minute to thank our panelists, right? So not only like obviously they're here on behalf of JP Morgan, but I think the advice that they've shared with their audience here is sort of career advice that everyone should take on and sort of learn from. And we'll see you at sort of the next event. We have an investment banking success panel and then a private equity panel in the next couple of weeks. And then on that note, thanks to the JP Morgan team. Thanks to everyone across North America, and have a great rest of the evening. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
So much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.